In the heart of New York City, where the streets never truly slept, there stood a house that everyone ignored. It sat wedged between two modern buildings, its dark windows like hollow eyes staring into the busy street. People passed by it every day. Tourists, workers, late-night wanderers. But no one ever stopped. No one ever looked too long. Because everyone knew, or at least they felt it. Ethan Cole had just moved to the city, chasing a fresh start. He didn't believe in ghost stories or urban legends. To him, every mystery had a logical explanation. Every shadow had a source. So when he first noticed the abandoned house, it didn't scare him. It intrigued him. Why would a place like that just sit empty? He asked his co-worker Lisa during lunch. Lisa froze for a moment, her smile fading. "You've seen it?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Ethan shrugged. "On 47th Street. Looks like it's been empty for years." Lisa looked down at her coffee, her fingers tightening around the cup. "Don't go near it," she said. Ethan laughed lightly. "What? Is it haunted?" She didn't laugh back. "People who go inside," she hesitated, then shook her head. "They don't come back the same." That only made Ethan more curious. That night, as the city lights flickered outside his apartment window, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the house, the way it stood there, untouched, forgotten, almost, waiting. Around midnight, he grabbed his jacket. "Just a quick look," he muttered to himself. The streets were quieter than usual as he walked toward 47th Street. A cold wind slipped through the buildings, carrying a strange stillness with it. And then he saw it. The house. Up close, it looked even worse. The paint was peeling, the wood cracked and rotting. The front gate hung slightly open, creaking softly as it moved with the wind. Ethan hesitated. For the first time, he felt it, a strange heaviness in the air, like the world around the house was holding its breath. He shook it off. "Just an old building," he whispered. Pushing the gate open, he stepped onto the property. The moment his foot touched the ground, the city noise behind him seemed to vanish. No cars, nothing, only silence. Ethan turned back toward the street. But somehow, it already felt much farther away than it should have been. Ethan stood still for a moment, staring back at the street. It didn't make sense. Just seconds ago, he had been surrounded by the distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout, the pulse of New York City. Now, there was nothing. The silence felt unnatural, thick, almost suffocating. "Okay, that's weird," he muttered. He pulled out his phone. No signal, of course, he thought. Old buildings, interference, something like that. Trying to steady himself, Ethan turned back toward the house. Up close, the front door looked even more unsettling. The wood was warped and cracked, as if it had been left to decay for decades. Deep scratches ran across its surface, long and jagged, too uneven to be from age alone. They looked deliberate. Ethan leaned in, tracing one of the marks with his eyes. What happened here? Before he could think any further, creak! The door slowly opened on its own. Ethan jumped back, his heart slamming against his chest. "No way," he whispered. The wind had stopped, completely. There was nothing that could have pushed the door open. For a moment, he considered leaving. Every instinct told him to turn around, to walk away, and never come back. But curiosity pulled harder. Taking a slow breath, Ethan stepped forward and crossed the threshold. The moment he entered, the air turned cold. Not just cool, cold in a way that seeped into his bones. Inside, the house was darker than it should have been. Even with faint moonlight slipping through broken windows, shadows clung to every corner. The smell hit him next. Damp wood, dust, and something else. Something faintly rotten. Ethan covered his nose slightly and took a few cautious steps inside. The floor creaked loudly beneath his weight, echoing through the empty halls like distant footsteps. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding smaller than he expected. No response. But then, tap. Ethan froze. It came from somewhere deeper inside the house, a soft, deliberate sound, like something moving. "Probably a rat," he said quickly, though his voice lacked confidence. Tap, tap, it came again. Slower this time. More intentional. Ethan's eyes scanned the darkness ahead. A long hallway stretched before him, its walls lined with faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. At the end of the hall, there was a staircase leading up into complete darkness, and for just a second, he thought he saw something move at the top. A shape, tall, still, watching. Ethan blinked. It was gone. "Yeah, definitely just my imagination," he whispered, forcing a nervous laugh. But as he took another step forward, the front door behind him slammed shut. Bang! Ethan spun around, his breath catching in his throat. He rushed to the door, grabbing the handle and pulling hard. It wouldn't budge, not even a little. The silence returned. He was trapped, and somewhere in the darkness above him, something had started to move again. Ethan's heart raced as he pressed his back against the cold wall, trying to steady his breathing. The house felt alive now. Every creak, every groan, every whisper of wind outside the broken windows seemed intentional, as if it were watching him, waiting. He swallowed hard and forced himself to look down the long hallway. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting and bending in the dim light. For a moment he thought he saw something flicker, like a silhouette darting behind a door frame. "Hello?" he called again, his voice shaking. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Then came the whispers. Soft, almost inaudible. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind, or maybe the hum of the city sneaking in through the cracks. But these were different. Words. Faint. Broken. Distorted. "Go. Back. Leave." Ethan froze. The voice was weak, raspy, like it had traveled decades through the walls to reach him. He took a step back, nearly tripping over the warped floorboards. "Don't. Stay." A sudden cold breeze brushed past him. Ethan shivered and pulled his jacket tighter. He wanted to leave, to run, but he was drawn forward, as if some invisible force was guiding him deeper into the house. At the end of the hallway, he noticed a door slightly ajar. Moonlight spilled out from the crack, illuminating the edges of a room filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. The whispers seemed louder here, wrapping around him, pressing against his mind. Ethan stepped closer, the floor groaning under his weight. The door creaked as he pushed it open further, revealing the room. It looked ordinary at first glance, an old living room frozen in time. A fireplace stood cold and empty, walls lined with shelves holding faded photographs and brittle books. But something about it felt wrong. Then he saw the mirror. An ornate, tall mirror leaned against the far wall, its glass surprisingly clear despite the dust. Ethan approached it cautiously. As he looked, he expected to see his own reflection. But he didn't. Instead, the glass rippled, and for a brief second, a pale face stared back at him, hollow eyes, twisted in a silent scream. The mouth moved, whispering words Ethan could not hear, yet somehow understood. "You shouldn't be here." He stumbled backward, hitting a chair, and the mirror went dark. The whispers stopped. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence, so thick that it pressed against his eardrums. Then, faintly, from upstairs, a slow, deliberate step. Someone, or something, was descending the staircase. Ethan's legs wanted to run, but his body refused to move. Every instinct screamed at him to escape, but a strange compulsion rooted him to the spot, forcing him to watch as the shadows at the top of the stairs began to take shape. Tall, thin, unnatural, and moving toward him with a calm, measured pace. The house had awakened, and Ethan realized with a sinking chill that it had been waiting for him all along. The sound of the steps echoed through the house, each one deliberate, slow, and impossibly heavy. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He pressed himself against the wall, hoping the shadows might somehow pass him by. But they didn't. The staircase at the end of the hall loomed like a black wound in the house. With each step, a cold draft slithered down, brushing against Ethan's face and making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He wanted to run, but the front door remained sealed shut, as if the house itself had swallowed the exit. The figure slowly emerged from the darkness, a tall, thin silhouette, impossibly lanky, with arms that seemed to stretch unnaturally as it moved. Its face was obscured, but Ethan could feel the weight of its gaze. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't human. Ethan's hands shook as he reached for the nearest sheet-covered chair, pulling it over to defend himself, even though he knew it wouldn't help. The whispers returned, closer now, circling around his head. "You came. You shouldn't be here. You can't leave." The figure paused halfway down the stairs, tilting its head slightly, as though considering him. Then it began to descend again. Each step seemed to drag the shadows of the room along with it, stretching them toward Ethan like long, grasping fingers. He finally forced himself to look around for another escape. A doorway to what looked like a kitchen appeared to his left. He bolted, crashing through the frame and into the room. The smell of decay was stronger here, mixed with something sweeter, almost metallic. Ethan fumbled through the dark cabinets, looking for anything to use as a weapon. His fingers closed around an old iron pan, rusted but solid. He gripped it tightly, heart hammering. The whispers grew louder, almost frantic, urging him to stop, to turn back. He glanced toward the staircase and froze. The figure was gone. The house was quiet, but Ethan knew better. Silence in this place wasn't peace. It was waiting. He moved toward the back door of the kitchen, hoping it might lead somewhere, anywhere, but as he reached for the handle, a hand, cold, skeletal, impossibly strong, clamped over his wrist. He yelped and spun around. No one was there. The shadows shifted. They moved like liquid creeping along the walls and ceiling, pooling in the corners. Ethan stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of a rug and hitting the floor, and then he heard it, a slow, deliberate whisper, right in his ear, though no one was near. "Stay. Forever." Ethan scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging. He ran toward the back of the house, hoping to find a window or another exit. Every room he passed was darker than the last, filled with shadows that seemed to move just beyond his vision. Then he saw it. A door leading to the basement, slightly ajar, a faint flickering light spilling out. It shouldn't have been lit. No electricity ran through this house, and yet it was calling him. Ethan knew instinctively. Whatever waited in the basement was the heart of this house's darkness, and somehow he felt drawn to it. Ethan's hand trembled as he gripped the doorknob to the basement. The flickering light inside pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, drawing him in despite every instinct screaming to turn back. He forced himself to take a deep breath and stepped down the narrow stairs. The air grew colder with each step, the shadows thickening around him, until they felt almost solid. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, stained with age, and something far darker, something that no light had touched for decades. The whispers followed him, closer now, circling his head like invisible predators. "You can't leave. You're ours, forever." The basement opened into a wide, cavernous space, far larger than the house above suggested. Rusted furniture lay scattered, broken toys and faded photographs littered the floor. But at the center was what drew Ethan's attention. An old wooden chest, covered in layers of dust, sitting under a single shaft of moonlight. Ethan approached it cautiously, his hand brushing away the dust. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, urgent. He could hear faint crying and murmurs as if hundreds of voices were trapped just beyond the walls, pressing against the fabric of reality. With a shaking hand, he lifted the chest's lid. Inside lay nothing, just shadows, moving and writhing as though alive. Then the whispers became voices, clearer now, forming words he could understand. "You found us. You can't leave. Join us." The shadows surged upward, spiraling around him, cold and suffocating. Ethan swung the iron pan wildly, but it passed through the darkness as if it were mist. He stumbled backward, falling onto the cold stone floor. In the flickering light, he saw them, pale, gaunt figures emerging from the shadows. Faces twisted in silent screams, eyes hollow, reaching for him. Ethan scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. He ran toward the stairs, but the shadows followed, stretching long arms that seemed to pull at his very soul. He reached the first step, then the second, but the staircase felt endless now. The basement seemed to stretch farther down, deeper than the house should allow. Ethan screamed, pounding on the stairs, desperate to escape. The whispers became deafening. "Stay, stay, stay." A hand grabbed his ankle. He fell hard, rolling down several steps, scraping his hands and knees. Panic surged through him, a raw, primal fear he had never known. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the grip released. Ethan rolled to the bottom and froze. The basement was empty. The shadows retreated, curling back into the corners. Silence swallowed the space, thick and suffocating. He got to his feet, shaking, covered in dust and sweat. The chest sat silently, unassuming, almost inviting again, and in that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. The house didn't just trap people. It fed on them. It whispered to them. It promised release, and then took everything. Somewhere far above, a floorboard creaked. A shadow moved at the top of the stairs, watching him. Ethan knew the house wasn't done with him yet, and for the first time he truly understood the truth Lisa had tried to warn him about. No one left this house unchanged, and some never left at all. Ethan stumbled up the stairs from the basement, shaking and disoriented. The house seemed different now, larger, endless, as though it had shifted while he was below. The hallways twisted unnaturally, the walls leaning inward at impossible angles. Each step echoed, but the sound didn't fade. It bounced back at him, warped and distorted, like the house itself was mocking him. Ahead, he saw a faint glow spilling from a doorway. Desperate for anything familiar, Ethan ran toward it. The door opened into a long room filled with mirrors, hundreds of them. Some cracked, some shattered, some perfectly intact. Every surface reflected not just his image, but the shadows lurking behind him, stretching across the glass like living things. He froze. The reflections were wrong. Each one showed him differently. Older, younger, twisted, terrified, screaming silently. Some mirrors didn't even show him at all. They reflected the room empty, yet he could hear faint whispers coming from them. "Join us. Stay. Forever." Ethan's pulse raced. He realized the mirrors weren't just showing him. They were observing him, tracing him. A sound behind him made him spin. A reflection moved when he didn't. A shadowy figure stepped out of one of the mirrors and into the room. Its face was pale, hollow, twisted into a scream that didn't make a sound. Its hands reached toward him. Ethan swung the iron pan, but it passed through the figure, meeting only the air. Panic clawed at him as the mirrors began to ripple, like water, and the reflections inside twisted and multiplied, faces screaming silently from every angle. Desperate, Ethan darted between the mirrors, hoping to find an exit. But every time he passed a mirror, another figure emerged, moving faster, closer, reaching out. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, now chanting as if hundreds of voices had merged into one. "Stay, stay, stay." He stumbled, falling against a cracked mirror. The reflection shattered into 1,000 shards, each one screaming a tiny, silent scream. Ethan scrambled to his feet, bleeding from small cuts, heart pounding in terror. And then he saw it. A doorway at the far end of the hall, glowing faintly. Hope surged. He sprinted toward it, weaving through the mirrors, ignoring the shadows that brushed his arms and legs like cold, skeletal fingers. He reached the doorway and threw himself through. For a moment he thought he'd escaped, but the hallway beyond was different. Darker, endless. The house had not finished with him. It had only just begun. Ethan ran down the endless hallway, the faint glow of the doorway behind him fading like a dying star. His lungs burned, and every muscle screamed, but he couldn't stop. Behind him, whispers swirled in the darkness, urgent, pleading, malicious. "You can't leave. You're ours." The shadows stretched along the walls, reaching for him, trailing like dark smoke. He felt cold fingers brush against his shoulders, his back, his arms. Each touch burned, as if the house itself was branding him, warning him to stop. But he ran anyway. Ahead, a faint light appeared, streetlight seeping through the front windows. Hope surged, and for the first time, he dared to believe he could escape. He pushed harder, flying down the hallway, stumbling over warped floorboards and broken furniture. The front door loomed ahead. It looked the same as before, yet somehow different. Stronger, darker, alive. Ethan slammed into it, yanking the handle. It wouldn't budge. Panic rose. He pounded on it, screaming, until his fists ached. The whispers were all around him now, deafening, relentless. "Stay, stay, stay." Suddenly the door swung open on its own, revealing the street beyond. Ethan didn't hesitate. He leapt through, tumbling onto the sidewalk. The cold air of New York City hit him like a wave. Cars honked. Distant voices carried on the wind. He was back. Alive. He scrambled to his feet and ran without looking back, weaving through the streets until the abandoned house was just a dark silhouette against the city lights. His heart still raced, his body shaking. But for now, he was free. That night, in his apartment, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the room seemed longer than it should be, stretching toward him. Every creak of the floor made him flinch, and when he finally dared to look into the mirror, his own reflection smiled back. But not entirely. It whispered, "We'll see you soon." Ethan's blood ran cold. The house wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had marked him. He knew, deep down, that he had escaped the house physically, but part of him would remain forever, trapped within its walls. The city outside went on as usual, oblivious. People passed by the abandoned house on 47th Street, never noticing its hollow windows or the strange stillness surrounding it. No one ever spoke of it. No one dared enter. But Ethan knew, and sometimes, late at night, when the wind whispered through the streets, he swore he could hear it calling him back. The house was patient, and it would wait forever.